Welcome back to The Big Picture. I'm Thom Hartmann. Coming up in this half hour, if you go to church on Sundays, you don't expect to hear a sermon about why one political candidate is better than another. So why are nearly 1,000 religious leaders now deciding to trash the separation of church and state and openly endorse political candidates? Also, did you know that you can donate money through credit card machines at churches in Sweden? Or that banking in Kenya means texting on a cell phone? Is the world headed for a digital economy? And if so, why might that be good news for the poor and impoverished? And there are a lot of big ideas flying around this election cycle, but which ones are going to help working people? And which ones are going to leave the middle class in the dust as the wealthy Romney-rich level elite continue to thrive? I'll tell you in tonight's Daily Take. To the rest of the news, more than 1,000 religious leaders across the nation have decided to take a wrecking ball to that wall separating church and state. The conservative group Alliance Defending Freedom has scheduled what they are calling Pulpit Freedom Sunday for October 7th, when church leaders across America will devote their sermons to the election and campaign on behalf of mostly right-wing political candidates. According to IRS law, churches enjoy tax-exempt status so long as they don't participate in political campaigns on behalf of or against any particular candidate. Those church leaders also plan to send video of their right-wing political sermons to the IRS in hopes of triggering a legal case that could strike down laws against tax-exempt political activity in churches. Today, many churches have been turned into very lucrative businesses, and those church businesses haven't shied away from using their wealth to aid numerous far-right political causes. So the question is, if churches want to operate like a business, and isn't it time they get taxed like a business as well? Joining me now to offer her take on this is Dr. Carol Swain, professor of political science and law at Vanderbilt University and author of the book, Be the People, A Call to Reclaim America's Faith and Promise. Dr. Swain, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I am very well. I hope you are too. So many churches are making millions, tens of millions of dollars. In fact, you have so many pastors who are, making way, way more than the average working American.
I disagree.
Why?
I disagree.
Seriously, you don't think that mega churches with multi-million-dollar budgets and pastors making $400,000 or $500,000 salaries are real?
I don't think that's the norm. There are some mega churches in most cities, but the average church, the pastor is not making millions of dollars, nor do I believe they are preaching from the pulpit, telling their congregants who to vote for. Mm-hmm. But I have noticed that there are more pastors now trying to instruct their congregations about biblical principles and telling them that they're responsible for their vote and that they should make sure that the candidate they support line up with biblical principles. And they're also saying you're electing a president, not a pastor.
Well, you remember, I'm guessing, Carol, when the centurion, I believe it was, came to Jesus and showed him a coin and said, should I be paying my taxes, or should I? And Jesus replied to him and said, whose picture's on that? And the guy said, Caesar. And he said, render unto Caesar what's Caesar's and unto God what's God's. In other words, the founder of Christianity called for a wall of separation between church and state. Isn't the moment that a church starts talking about political candidates and elections the moment that they've stepped over that line that the founder of Christianity established?
Tom, that in 1954, Lyndon Johnson passed the Johnson Amendment that he is responsible for the IRS code against churches. Yeah, up until then, churches could talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. I think that they have constitutional rights like any other institution. And so they are trying to reclaim their voice because they have been silent for so long. We have lost, or we are losing, the culture war. I think that churches have an obligation to teach biblical principles. And if one political party lines up to those principles better than another, then it makes sense for them to at least hold their congregants responsible, or at least give them the information they need to make intelligent choices based
you
on
realize, Dr. Swain, that's the exact same argument the Taliban makes.
Well, let's not talk about the Taliban. I'm talking about America, where we're supposed to have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and freedom of association, and churches don't lose their constitutional rights. And it was 1954.
But there's no constitutional right. It was 64. And there's no constitutional right to a tax advantage, to a tax break. Why should we be giving these huge multi-million-dollar corporations, and they are incorporated even as nonprofits, why should we be giving these giant corporations huge tax breaks when they're violating the law?
There are some churches that have a lot of, they have more than just a sanctuary. That they do have bookstores, they have a lot of other things going on. It's up to the community to decide, when a church is involved in so many other businesses that it has nothing to do with their religious mission. But most of the churches I know are very much involved in ministering, not just to their congregants, but also to the community and to people around the world.
Well, let's agree that that should be tax exempt. But when they start becoming political preachers, haven't they done the exact same thing as if they decided to go in the business of manufacturing cars? They've stepped out of the religious business and they've gone into something else. In this case, either politics or auto manufacturing.
I don't know how many churches are actually telling their congregants to vote for a particular candidate. I know at my church, my pastor is not telling us to vote for a particular political party or candidate, but he is instructing us about biblical values and principles and telling us that we're responsible for how we use our vote. He's telling us that we're responsible for how we use our vote, and we're not a mega church, and the money that goes into the church, we see how it's being used, and it's being used for good purposes.
Yeah, well, I'm all in favor of the good purposes. I'm just, politics is basically a business of speech. And so it seems that I'm with you on free speech, but I'm not with, the tax code is not a constitutional right. There's not a constitutional right not to pay taxes.
It was Lyndon Johnson that got that amendment through, and it was
I know. He was tired of the churches beating up on him. I'm totally with you on that. LBJ did that in '64, basically to get the churches to stop picking on him.
Does that bother you that the churches had that right up until 1954?
64, yeah. No, I acknowledge that. Dr. Carol Swain, we're out of time, but thanks so much for dropping by and having this conversation with me. It's always nice talking with you.